Hey everybody, welcome back. I am so glad to talk to you guys today. Today is a great day. I had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We spent some time with my sister-in-law, got to know her a little bit better. She's an absolute doll, and if she ends up watching this video, great. I love you. It was wonderful to meet you. So, with that little introduction out of the way, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel before we get started, that would be great. Now into today's video. So today I wanted to do a little bit more of a simple video. Today I wanted to tell my coming out story and my experience being a member of the LGBT community. Everyone's experience is different, right? So your mileage may vary. And I've shared bits and pieces of my experience, right? Whether it's in the workplace or other areas of people's lives. But one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was my experience. And it's something I haven't really broadcast to the world, but it's something I feel like is very important. So grab your snacks, grab your popcorn, grab your whatever, your drinks. It's going to be a minute. So when I was a kid, I had interesting experiences. We'll put that at, just leave that at that. Why my parents never thought I was gay, or maybe they did. They just pretended that I wasn't. I don't know. But my first experience with being different is I remember being 7 or 8, and the Powerpuff Girls would come on, or I would watch Dora the Explorer. And I loved those things. And I only had a couple girl cousins, and so it was really fun to play with them, play dolls and stuff. But I was also into boy things. I loved playing with action figures, but let's be real here, action figures are still kind of a doll. My grandparents had this dollhouse in their basement. And I remember one time, my grandpa was like, "Oh, you want to make little bits of furniture for the dollhouse?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'd be so fun." So my grandma and grandpa took me to Robert's Arts and Crafts when they were still in business. And we went looking around, and they had these little DIY wood build-yourself furniture kits. And at the time, I loved bright, vibrant colors. I still do, don't get me wrong. I mean, pink's my favorite color. So one of the crazy things that happened was that we go home, and I'm inspired by Cafe Rio. For you Utahns and people that have a Cafe Rio, you know exactly what I mean. In the early 2000s, maybe I'll put a picture in here just so you can take a look. But bright, vibrant colors on the tables and on the chairs, the cracks, everything, just the natural patina. It's so cool. I thought it was amazing. And so I got inspired, and I tried my best to paint the furniture that way. It did not turn out that great. And let's just say, color vomit. It was awful. It was just an explosion of color. It didn't turn out too great. But I made all these little furniture pieces, and I loved rearranging the furniture in the dollhouse. Maybe not so much playing with the dolls at the time. I was probably 10, maybe 11, and I loved rearranging the furniture inside the dollhouse. And I was thinking about this the other day. There were so many signs when I was little, but as I aged, things got just more challenging from there. I remember being about 11, and I really, really wanted sparkly pink shoes. My parents wouldn't let me get any. They were afraid of me getting bullied. I love my parents dearly, so don't get me wrong, but one of the things that they had told me was that it's fine when you're little, right? We can justify that, but we don't want you to get picked on. You're a little bit older, and those are childish things. And so I kind of moved along, and I got obsessed with neon green for a while. As you can see, my backdrop's neon green. Anyway, I had a pair of neon green Converse, and I would wear my neon pink shirt because I could get away with that at the time. I had bleached hair. I tried to do the punk look or the beach bum look. Almost worked. I'm debating whether or not to dye my hair again. We'll see if I actually do. But I believe that everyone should embrace who they are. It's kind of crazy to me because I feel like a lot of people can't be themselves. And when I was about 11, 12. I was starting going through physical changes. And I had my first crush on a boy. I'll never forget his name. I'm not going to share it here. But I thought he was so cute. And I kept it to myself. I was at a charter school at the time, and so, I had some friends that were different. We were all kind of unique, we were the rebels. One of my friends was an absolute theater kid. He was fabulous, if you know what I mean. Just really great at acting and just a hoot to be around. And then you have a couple of my other friends. They were both girls. They were awesome. One was really short, and she was the rebel. Absolute bomb. Fun, fun, fun to be around. And then the final person in our group of four, she is a sweetheart. Ironically enough, 3 out of the 4 of us are a part of the LGBT community, so that worked out pretty good. There was a girl, to prove to everybody that I was straight, right? Because people were convinced, in 7th grade that I wasn't. So I decided to, ask out my best friend. And when I asked her out, she's like, Nate, we gotta be real here. You're not straight. That's not gonna work. And I was like, what? And I was like heartbroken. I was so confused. I was like, I've been figured out. Oh no. So I bottled it up. I'm like, no. You're beautiful. I want to go on a date with you. But one of the things that happened that was really, really unfortunate is that one of my closest friends, he is my best friend. And to this day, we had a little bit of a falling out, but we're getting back to that level of friendship that we had when we were younger, which I'm looking forward to. And hopefully we can make amends and we could just, I'm not going to say pretend it never happened because it did, but, move on from it. But that's neither here nor there. And he came out. And his mother was going through cancer and she had a hard time. And she worked at the school and she was an absolute sweetheart. Unfortunately, she passed. And it left my best friend destroyed. And when he came out, it was very, very difficult for him. And when I saw how difficult it was, I knew that I didn't want that. And so because of that, what I did is I took my emotions, I took my personality, put it in a jar, put it in the closet. No one was ever going to find out. I was going to die before anyone found out that I was gay. And the unfortunate thing about all of this is that a lot of people tend to say, okay, we're fine with gay people as long as they aren't outwardly flamboyant. Don't push it down my throat. I've worked in enough industries to be able to understand something that is kind of disturbing about most industries. It doesn't matter if you're in automotive and in car sales. It doesn't matter if you sell homes. It doesn't matter if you're in construction. The mantra seems to be the same. People will talk in graphic detail about their sex lives at work, and it's inappropriate. It needs to stop. There's a reason why a lot of gay people don't feel comfortable around straight people, and we're trying to push the narrative to change things and have that freedom of sexual expression and that sex positive movement. Because there's a lot of things that we can benefit from. A lot of people don't like change. I get it. I don't like going outside when it's raining to change a light bulb. But sometimes it has to be done. And in order for us to move on, sometimes difficult choices need to be had. Or made, But I do want to get back on track here. So one of the things that I did throughout the rest of my junior high experience was I started, trying to be a little bit more masculine. Pink clothes went away. I did start wearing a little bit more blue, maybe some tan, some jeans, things like that. And my obsession with dyed hair started going away, and I stopped having the desire to paint my nails, do facials or anything. And then when I was in high school, I was so depressed because I used to go to a church-sponsored class called seminary. And I would always go into class early, and I will never forget my instructor. I'm not going to give his name for obvious reasons. I don't want to dox anybody. But he was actually a very kind man. And something he said was that really got to me. He's like, you should not be afraid of who you are because God knows who you are. And it was a wonderful time for me because I finally felt like someone was starting to see me for who I am. And then I got a new seminary teacher for the next year. I'm a junior in high school, and I was in public high school at this point. I had left the charter school, and I had a really hard teacher. Someone who was very orthodox. Gays are going to hell, and homosexuality is a choice. Pray the gay away. And so I started doing that because I believed that it was real. I believed that I could overcome my homosexuality and my fabulous nature by being something I wasn't. And every day I had seminary, which was 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week, because we alternated class schedules, so A and B days, and sometimes you would have 3-day weeks, 2-day weeks, and it would alternate. Anyway, I would pray every day on my way to seminary because it was in a separate building from the high school. And I remember about halfway through my junior year, I was just in tears every single day I had seminary. I did not want to go. I was so heartbroken that nothing was changing that I decided to say, okay, things like God isn't real, spirituality doesn't matter, and if I'm already damned, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. And so my opinion doesn't matter. And so I bottled that up for a long time, and I became a non-believer of the LDS Church, which is great. Believe what you want to believe, right? And I had a lot of upward pressure, not necessarily from my parents, but from people in my church, to serve an LDS mission. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. At least that's what I was telling myself. I didn't tell anybody this, but essentially I did serve my mission. But this was my plan. Rock solid plan. Okay, you're going to go serve your mission. It's only 2 years. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You're 18. And as soon as you get back from your mission, you can fall off the face of the earth and it'll be like nothing ever happened. That was my plan. Rock solid. Except on my mission, the strangest thing happened. I was an absolute jerk. I was not a pleasant person to be around. I was dishonest with who I was as a person. So you think I'm going to be honest with others? Absolutely not. Because I can't even be honest with myself. Honesty is one of those things that you develop as you're growing up, right? And figuring out who you are. Because you have to start becoming honest with who you are as a person. And, your imagination is big when you're really little. And so you'll fib and say things like, that house is the size of a skyscraper, because the world is so big when you're small. But when you grow up and you're 16, 17, 18, 19, that's no longer the case. And I think about all of my siblings. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so I think about all of my siblings. And I have my little sister. She's in high school and she's an absolute doll. I love her. And she means the world to me. And I see how hard it is for her, just to be in modern society. It's not an easy place to be. And maybe that's a conversation for a different day. But I just look at how things have evolved. And I think if I were, 5 or 6 years younger and had a different experience in high school, it would have been a lot easier for me to come out when I was younger. But I'm grateful that I didn't, because I had some really unique experiences, especially on my mission. So let's get back to that. When I was on my mission, and this is about 2014. 2013 is when I started my mission. I'm about halfway through 2014. And I'm an absolute butthead. I don't even do my scripture studies in the morning. Every morning you have a scripture study session. And I'm flipping through some scriptures, doing my thing. But I'm not reading them. I'm not invested in the study because I don't believe in it. I don't believe an ounce of it. I didn't even, I've read the first chapter, first verse of the Book of Mormon hundreds of times, and that's where it always ends. Until one day, I got paired with a mission companion, This mission companion, for a little bit of context, was someone I came into the mission field with. He was in the Mexico MTC, and I was in the Provo MTC. MTC is a missionary training center, and that's where you go for a few weeks to learn scriptural stuff. I was not paying attention the whole time, I'm not going to lie. And then you go out to your assigned missions. I served in Arizona, and I remember telling this missionary, and we had been called to 2 different missions. He was Spanish speaking, and I was English speaking. And I told him, yo, someday we're going to be companions. And I was totally, I totally believed it. I don't know how it was going to happen because, usually English and Spanish speaking missionaries don't get paired together. But it happened. And he, sorry, sometimes I get a little emotional over this, was so patient, so kind. And he did something for me that I don't think anyone in my entire life had done to that point. Is I was flipping through my scriptures like I always did, and we'd been mission companions for about 2 days. And he looks over and he's like, hey, Nate, you're flipping through the book pretty quick. You're not going to read your scriptures today? And I was like, no. Well, about a week goes by, You're on a 6-week transfer. So, after our first week, he goes, are you not going to read your scriptures at all? And I said, no, I don't really feel like it. And it's just not my thing. And he says, Elder Bartlett, because in the mission, you have elder or sister, and I was an elder. And he goes, Elder Bartlett, if you keep doing what you're doing, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want, but why are you here? And I said, I don't honestly know, just here to appease my family. And I told him that. Point blank, first honest thing out of my mouth in probably a year, which is crazy, right? And he says, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But don't you think it is worthwhile that you at least read this book cover to cover so you know why certain people believe in this faith? And at a minimum, understand why some people are so dedicated to doing this missionary work. And I said, that's a fair point. I'll think about it. Well, the next day I took his words to heart and I actually started reading the Book of Mormon, and I actually read it cover to cover. And, the 6 weeks ends and I have about, I don't know, let's say 2 chapters left in the entire book. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But this next companion I got really reshaped the way I did things. And he was someone who I had roomed with. We weren't mission companions previously, but we had roomed in the same apartment building and in the same unit. And he had called me horrible things like, you're an absolutely horrible person, an absolute liar, which I was. I mean, I'm not going to deny that I wasn't. But it was very derogatory, and he hated me. I'm not going to lie, I didn't like him that much either. But I didn't have a reason to absolutely despise him because everything he had said wasn't wrong. And we get the memo that we're going to be mission companions, and my heart sinks like that. Like, no joke, I am freaking out, panicking. And my mission companion, when he found out that's what the transfer setup was going to be, he's like, no, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, Nate. You're going to be fine. Well, about 2 hours later, after we get the news of who we're going to be new companions with, he goes, I get a text from this other missionary that I didn't get along with, and he sends me a very, very long text, and he says, Nate, I'm going to use your first name, and I am not going to lie. When I got the news that I was going to be your companion, there were a lot of things that went through my head, but the one thing that continuously went through my mind is how poorly I treated you, and you did not deserve that. Boom. Hit me like a ton of bricks. And then he continued with, I am so sorry for everything I said, everything I did. I am willing to try and restart an acquaintanceship or even try and build a friendship with you if you will allow me the honor. Sincerely, so and so. And I'm in tears and I was just emotionally broken and I said, thank you so much for these words. I have been thinking about them every day for a very long time. I accept your apology. I want you to know that most of the things you had a problem with me and who I was, you weren't lying. I was dishonest. I was arrogant. I was boastful. And I wasn't the person that I should have been, at least coming out into the mission field. And he sends me another text saying, I accept your apology. We meet up and we do our thing. And then, about a month, because we were companions together for about a month. And we're about a month in and he shoots me a text. Because he's in the bathroom. He's like, I am not doing well. We may need to go home soon. So we go out, do a little bit more work, and then we have to go back to the church building. It's loud outside. It's raining. There's fire trucks. I don't know why the fire trucks were out. Maybe there was a car wreck, but in this area, it wasn't really one of the best areas in my mission. And there were SWAT raids all the time. So it could have been a police car for all I know. But I was in one of the little teaching rooms. We call it the primary room. And it was directly across the street or across the hall from the bathroom. My mission companion's doing his thing. And I decided to play the piano. I'm a little bit of a pianist. Not really good, but I do play. And I get this impression that I need to finish the scriptures because I only had a couple verses at that point. And as I finished the Book of Mormon, I don't think it was a confirmation that the LDS Church was true, but I remember these distinct words entering my head. It's okay. I am here. And everything outside went silent. It was so quiet that I literally thought I was dead. It was the craziest spiritual experience I have ever had in my entire life. And I had had so many crazy experiences on my mission. I had been chased by Rottweilers. Someone let their Rottweilers loose and they chased after us. And the guy was laughing as the Rottweilers chased us down the street on our bikes. It was very mean, very cruel. I had another experience where a mission companion and I had gotten in a fist fight. I have scars along my forehead from his ring that dug into my skin. One of the most incredible experiences throughout all of this is that once I had that realization that I was going to be okay no matter what, I knew that I had to change. I didn't necessarily believe that the church was true at this time, and I still don't know if it is the true and only church. But one thing I do know is that I had to change, and I started making those in some ways big leaps, huge leaps, and I thought I started to understand who I was. And I remember it was probably the last 6 or 7 months of my mission. I had gotten to a point where I was like, I need to come clean. I need to tell my mission president. Every mission has a mission president that oversees all the missionaries. Him and his wife help facilitate, all of the missionaries and make sure that they're healthy, spiritually, mentally, and physically. All of those types of things. And I decided to schedule a meeting with my mission president. Because at this point, I knew that I was technically not in good standing with the current policies at the time. And I remember looking my mission president in the eye, and he goes, Nate, I know you're struggling, but I thought you were doing pretty good. We had an interview about a week ago. What's so urgent that you needed to meet with me so soon? And I said, well, I need to tell you something. And I should have told you when I first came into the mission, and I apologize, I'm gay. And there was no comment for a while, and then he looks me in the eye and he says, "Well, you should probably keep that to yourself. Um, do you know how bad that sounds? A gay missionary. How can people take you seriously?" And at this point, I'm trying to be emotionally sound. I'm shaky a little bit, and I feel like my world is about ready to explode. So after the meeting, I get in the car. My mission companion says to me, "What was wrong? What was the deal with that?" And I said, "I am so sorry, Elder. I didn't tell you because I was afraid that you would freak out. Um, but I'm gay." So I told my mission companion. And he told me that his sister was gay and that regardless of what happens, or his sister is a lesbian, regardless of what happens, I will be okay in this life and in the next. And I just couldn't hold back the tears anymore, and I just let them flow. And he helped me through a rough spot. But those words, my mission president, kept coming back to my head. "Do you know how bad that sounds? Do you know how bad that sounds?" And I started to believe that my life wasn't worth living. And I started going to therapy while I was on my mission. And that last month, because I did end up going home about 5 to 6 months early, and that last month, I almost threw myself in front of a bus. I actually started to tip my bike intentionally, and I stopped. All because my mission companion was like, "Hey, Elder," and grabbed my bike. And we get home, and he's like, "What? Are you feeling okay? Are you lightheaded?" And I said, "I don't want to live anymore." And that conversation I had with my mission companion was really difficult. And the next morning, I called my mission president and told him that I needed to go home, that I wasn't spiritually or emotionally where I needed to be, and that I was suicidal. And so I do. I go home. It was hard for my mom. It was hard for my dad. It was hard for everybody. But I had never seen so much love and support, and everyone treated it as though I had completed the full 2 years, and it meant the world to me. They were holding the banner when I got home from my mission, and when I was coming down the escalator at the airport. It was the most comforting thing I had ever felt in my entire life, just to be around people that loved me. And I'll never forget it. But my experience didn't change just there. It kind of got a little bit harder after that, because in order to be released, honorably, I had to go and meet with a church guidance counselor. So I go meet with this church guidance counselor, and this church guidance counselor tells me essentially that because you're gay, you can't, get married, you can't have sexual thoughts of any kind towards men, and you just need to live a life of celibacy. And I always thought, celibacy doesn't make sense to me, because if families are the cornerstone of the LDS Church, we should really be embracing all families. It doesn't matter if you're gay or straight, or trans or anything else. And going through this huge bout of self-doubt, I just bottled up my emotions again. I was more honest than I had ever been in my entire life, but I still kept that secret to myself. We fast forward down the road, and I decided to come out. I was dating a girl at the time, and I knew that at this point, I wasn't happy. And my mom could see it. My dad could see it. And I actually did like this girl. I thought she was beautiful. But I wasn't attracted to her sexually. But I found her to be amazing, kind, patient. She was from Peru. She was a hard worker. Everything you could have wanted in a partner for life, and she just didn't fit the bill. It was hard. And so the first person I told that I was gay to was her. I started meeting with a therapist about a month before, and he told me, Nate, you have to be honest with me. I can only help you if you're honest with yourself. Who are you? And I said, I'm Nathaniel Bartlett. He said, no, what is your full name? I gave my full name. He said, okay, that's a start. What do you believe? And it dawned on me that I didn't have a belief of my own moral compass. And so I started poking around. I was so self-hating. I hated gay people. I hated myself for being gay. I hated everything. And I just hated that other people were able to accept themselves for who they were. And it got to a point where I had to make a choice. Do I tell my therapist that I'm gay? I've already tried to tell everybody my entire life, and it has led nothing to anything other than heartbreak. And I tell my therapist, I'm Nathaniel Bartlett, and I'm attracted to men. And he said, that is wonderful. That is who you are. It's not all that you are, but that's who you are. You are a man who wants an emotional and sexual interaction with a man. You deserve that special and sacred relationship that heterosexual people have. Because those are special and sacred moments. And I'm an emotional wreck. I'm a puddle, I'm just sobbing everywhere. And he said, you haven't been able to be yourself in a long time. Or ever. And it's going to take you years to figure out who you are. But you need to start somewhere. You should probably tell your girlfriend who you are. Because a relationship cannot be strengthened by deceit. So I end that session, and the next day, I knew I should have told her much sooner, but she was leaving for Peru. And I didn't want to tell her before because I felt like she was going to be heartbroken. But the words of my therapist kept hitting me. And I call my girlfriend and I ask her if she can meet me in Salt Lake on her way to the airport. And I was working over by a train station, ironically right next to a cemetery and a train station, so it worked out great. And she meets me there, and we were talking about everything, And then she has to go, right? Her flight's gonna leave, and she needs to be to the airport early. It's an international flight. And I said, there's one more thing I need to tell you. And she goes, what is it? And I said, I'm gay. She didn't even move for like what seemed like an hour, but I knew it was like about a minute. And she goes, I am so sorry. And I am sorry that you have to deal with this. And I hope nothing but the best for you. I think we can try and make this work if you want. Do I have permission to talk to my mother about it in Peru? And I said, sure. So she goes down to Peru, visits her mom. And her mom asks her, are you worried that he's going to be unfaithful? Is that why you're afraid that this gay boy could be a great father, or are you concerned that he will cheat on you and that he just won't be loyal? And she said, the disloyalty is the least of my concerns. My biggest concern is, will I ever be enough? And she, I don't know if I will ever be enough for him, and I can't live this life this way. And so she gets back. We go to a small little frozen yogurt place, and my treat, you know. We're just sitting there and we're chatting, and she goes, Nate. And she grabs my hands, you know, both of them, just like this, and goes, I love you. Or at least, I love you as a person. I don't think I can be with you because I will always have this doubt. Not that you're going to be disloyal, but whether or not I'm going to be enough. And right then and there, we ended it. My cousin went and did some things because my cousin was going to BYU, and she has, you know, a very successful business in the BYU bookstore at BYU. And my cousin went and did a few photo shoots for her. If I could speak English today, that'd be great. And I helped her sell some products that were really, really amazing. And my cousin hands me this wallet, and he goes, this is from your ex-girlfriend. She wants you to have this as a reminder of how you helped her strengthen her business and how you strengthened her body as a person. And she will never forget you for this. And she wants nothing but the best for you. And she wanted me to also let you know that you deserve to find the man of your dreams who will treat you like a princess. You deserve that. And, you know, I'm getting misty-eyed because I'm an emotional critter, okay? I'm not going to lie. I'm a puddle, okay, when it comes to my emotions. And we go down the road, and I get my first boyfriend, and there was some family struggles. I dealt with my sister-in-law being very homophobic, and she was very uncomfortable bringing a guy around, and it was difficult the first few years, and I remember so many terrible things happening. And then the last couple boyfriends that I had before I met my husband were very difficult. The first one was very physically abusive. The next one was emotionally abusive. He would say things like, yo, you need to just spend more time with me. I don't want you to build things for me. I want you to just make things for me. And I show my care not by buying people things. Anyone can buy anything, right? Especially if you have money. You can buy whatever you want. But what can't be bought is something that is made with love and care for that person. And when you don't live with your romantic partner, you know, you're living at home or you live in an apartment, you don't tend to do those things. You don't tend to spend as much money. You would rather build something because it means more. And I remember that this, what I thought was going to be, you know, love, wasn't. I had a tendency to stay in these toxic relationships that were very harmful to me, and I just let the abuse come in. And being autistic does not make it easy. It makes it very difficult, and it's very painful for a lot of people. And on occasion, terrible things can happen. But one thing I will leave here as we wrap up this little story is that around Christmas time, after I give his Christmas present, I remember talking to my boyfriend's parents because they had come in from Mexico, and they didn't speak very much English, and, you know, I'm trying to have a conversation with them, and I said, yeah, no, he's a great guy, don't worry, he's great. And his parents laugh and go, We love him, but he's very selfish, no? I'm like, well, he can be, and I'm, minimizing his flaws. And I think a lot of people in any relationship with partners that have certain disadvantages, shall we say, I'm not even, now I'm just slurring words together, which means this video really needs to come to a close. But regardless, I never forgot that. And I downloaded a dating app right around New Year's, and I kept downloading, deleting, downloading, and deleting, and it was the same app. It was Bumble. And I was telling myself, do I really want to keep dating? Dating is so miserable, especially when you're starting to figure out that being who you are is very difficult, because how do you put yourself out there? The internet is a great place to showcase any idea. But the most amazing thing happened when my cousin said, Nate, you've been through so much. If this doesn't work, you're going to keep trying again and again. You don't want to be alone. You're an amazing person, and you deserve someone who will treat you like a queen. And then I started thinking about something my ex-girlfriend said. You deserve someone who will treat you like a princess. And I wanted my Prince Charming. Something quintessential about these conversations you have with somebody. Sometimes it's fate, sometimes it's destiny. And every time I downloaded and deleted the app and I logged in, I always saw the same picture of the same guy. And I was like, ugh, I can't. And then my cousin looks me in the eye and says, you can, but you can. And he swipes right for me, and it was a match. And we talked nonstop. My husband and I's first date was on January 10th at 6 p.m. at a little cafe in Salt Lake City. I walked in the door, and he told me much later, oh man, I'm in trouble. And the heartwarming part about all of this is that 3 years later, I am incredibly happy. I am free to be who I am. And I love that when you find that somebody, that person that treats you like a queen, that treats you like a king, you are their royalty. That is amazing, because you can really, really bond, not just emotionally, sexually, or even spiritually, but you really get to know one another on an intellectual level and understand each other for who they are. The true self can be achieved as soon as the false self is killed. You are not what others want you to be. You are who you are unapologetically. And when you are that person, everyone wants to be around you. There are going to be people who do not like you. So what? No one is perfect. And not everyone has to like you or like what you have to say. But one thing is certain, that if you stand up for yourself and you work hard, you will become the best version of yourself. That is my coming out story. That is my experience. And until next time, it's been my coffee corner, and I'll catch you on the next one.